Hi there and welcome to my channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Angie and I'm a chemist who loves makeup. There are a ton of celebrity makeup brands now, celebrity skincare brands, collaborations with influencers, influencer brands, and a lot of times you will see pictures put out by these brands of the celebrity or influencer associated with this product donning a lab coat, glasses, the hairnet, and it makes it appear that they're the one whipping up that lipstick in the laboratory. The most recent evidence of this is this picture of Kylie Jenner put out by Kylie Cosmetics. So today I'm going to give you my experience on someone who has a background in science, worked in a lab, worked in manufacturing, on if their PPE is considered acceptable for what they are doing. We are going to define PPE here. I'm sure many of you in the last few years probably have learned this term, but in case you haven't, PPE stands for personal protective equipment. To give a formal definition, we're going to go off of OSHA's definition instead of from like a health perspective, because manufacturing and healthcare are similar but not identical situations in terms of PPE. So their definition is to minimize exposure to hazards that cause serious workplace injuries and illnesses. And then I do want to point out the point of PPE for cosmetic manufacturing is also to protect the consumer as well. We're going to call out the pictures of these celebrities in these lab coats for what they are. It's a marketing tool. These pictures imply heavy involvement on the part of the celebrity or influencer in the direct manufacturing or development of the actual product. Actually, recently, most of these celebrities and influencers, when they come out with these lines, you don't see a lot of these pictures because they probably don't have involvement at this level, probably never even visiting the site where their cosmetics or a site where their cosmetics are getting manufactured. And for celebrities, it's probably more time-based, time constraint-based. But for influencers who are starting their brands, flying out and spending all that money to see these sites, probably not going to get a lot out of it other than it being a really cool opportunity just to see how the cosmetics are manufactured. In terms of benefiting their business, it probably will not help that much. And then I have to do this disclaimer before we actually dive into these pictures. The criticism that I am going to give of their PPE is not a direct criticism of their intelligence or their character. This is simply a learning tool for you guys because they're probably never even going to see it or care. And this is just teaching you what I think is acceptable based on my own experiences. But we have to remember most of these people are not going to have a background similar to mine. So they would not be familiar with the protocols in these situations unless they were heavily briefed before going into the situation. So with that, we're going to go on the pictures. And we're going to start off with what inspired this video, the Kylie Jenner, Kylie Cosmetic pictures. So I'm not really sure what she's doing here. It kind of reminds me of this thread that I saw that on Reddit that was like bad stock photos of my job where they're supposed to look like what the job is, but they're not actually doing anything relevant to the job, so you know that it's just a model posing. So she looks like what appears to be an R&D lab. You can see the balance. That's a scale. There's a lot of substances and a box of gloves. So what is she wearing? So she has a lab coat on, she's wearing long pants, sneakers, she has no goggles on, no gloves, and her hair is not pulled back. Since she is in a R&D lab setting, not a place where consumer product is actually manufactured, we have to remember that her PPE is going to be different than in those kind of areas. So that's why here, a hairnet is not essential because she is not at risk of contaminating the product. Mostly the PPE she's going to be wearing is for her own protection in this scenario. To start with some positives, her feet and ankles are fully covered, which is great. In the lab, you don't want any scandalous ankles because that puts you at risk if something spills near your foot. You now have lost that barrier between your skin and that substance, where if something were to accidentally spill, you could remove it before that substance would cause any harm. So that brings me to another point. These lab coats are not impenetrable. Some are more heavy duty than others. Honestly, for the most part, they are just to buy you time. If you spill something on that lab coat, your first instinct is to rip it off. That's why most of the time they don't even have real buttons. They're like snap buttons. You can just take it off, throw it where it needs to go, and you are safe. So things that are good practice that I want to point out, but not necessarily essential depending on if you're working or not working in the lab, is her long hair and then it's not pulled back. If she's mixing, it could get caught in the mixer, a heating unit. That could be really dangerous for herself. I, for one, almost always have my hair pulled up in the lab, but in this situation, she's not doing anything based on the picture that is putting her at risk of that being a hazard. Also in this picture, she's touching a container or something that's very brightly colored. I don't know what the potential hazards are of that substance because I don't know what it is. She also probably does not know what it is. Therefore, it is good practice to be wearing gloves anytime you are touching those containers. It's nice to assume that everyone is really neat when they're taking things out of the container, but that's just not the case. Stuff gets on the sides, stuff spills, and if you don't know 100% what's in there, you probably should be wearing gloves if you were going to touch that container. Finally, she is not wearing any goggles in this picture. In the lab, it is best practice to keep those goggles on. And the only reason for goggles in any situation is to protect yourself. Pretty much exclusively to not get things in your own eyeballs. In these labs, a lot of stuff probably isn't harmful because it's stuff that goes into cosmetics, but at higher concentrations or direct exposure to your eye, it could be kind of irritating and that could cause some damage to your eye. And that's why in the lab setting, it's important to have that barrier. Obviously, if no one's working, you're not getting near the lab bench, it's probably not a big deal, but still good practice. So here is the second picture from that same visit. This one I think they particularly did because if you notice all the really pretty pigments in the background, this is a really aesthetic photo. And what she is looking at right here appears to be what is called like a hot plate. It's a hot plate stirrer mixer. So it has the capability to heat and stir. Whatever's in there in the beaker, it looks like it might be stirring and it could also be heating. Both of those things are gonna put her at risk of something splashing out if either of those elements were to get out of control. And again, she's not wearing goggles here and she's staring right down the barrel of that beaker. If you notice also, in this picture, we get a better angle of her lab coat. It is open. It's directly open to her shirt, which means if she were to get a hazardous substance on her, she does not have that lab coat barrier. So now you're gonna have to remove the shirt you're wearing in order to save your skin. So she's putting her skin and her designer clothes at risk here. So now we have another picture of Kylie, and this one looks like they are in a manufacturing area and they are pressing eyeshadow is what I believe it looks like. She has gloves, safety goggles, and it looks like she has a disposable lab coat on. I think she has a white sweatshirt on, but the woman next to her has a disposable one, and it kind of looks like it has the same seam pattern. So those are just like really cheapy ones. Oftentimes they use those for visitors because then they can just toss them. But it looks like they probably just use them for all their staff at wherever this place is. I do have to point out though that her hair does need to be tucked in better to the hairnet because you can see the bangs coming from the front and like a little bit on her hood. And so that you're risking that getting into the eyeshadow, and we do not like hairy makeup products. At least in this house, we don't. So next we're gonna be moving on to this picture of James Charles. This one looks like, I don't think, this one wasn't from a collab because I don't think he's had a collab with Colourpop. I think he did a video with Colourpop, and so that's why he has this lab coat with his name on it. The room is kind of weird, to be honest with you. It kind of looks like a lab, but there's like what appears to be a TV in the back. It honestly looks like pretty disorganized. James's PPE here is actually pretty good. He has the goggles on, he has the gloves on, he's touching a bottle of something with the gloves, and he has his lab coat on, and it looks like it's closed. It might be open, but let's give him the benefit of the doubt that it was buttoned because we can only see the top button in this one. And he's in a lab, so no hairnet, so that's fine. So I do want to point out, if you notice his jewelry, the bracelets on his wrist, so in a lab setting, those are acceptable. In a manufacturing, they are not acceptable. That could put you at risk of hurting yourself if you're near machinery and it gets caught on there, something, or if it breaks and then it gets into the product. So that's why mostly in facilities, the only thing you're allowed is actually like a wedding band is usually the typical amount that you are allowed. And so next we're gonna be looking at a couple pictures of Jeffree Star. So we have to remember that Kylie and Jeffree do own their own companies, and because they have more experience, they should be more informed about what PPE they're supposed to be wearing. And Jeffree does often post pictures of visiting like these facilities directly. So this one is definitely an older picture for sure. And this one looks like somewhere where they probably do weigh out the ingredients for production, or maybe smaller pilot batches of actual product are made. And he should be wearing safety goggles here. That's really the only criticism I have. He has a hairnet, long pants, lab coat, gloves. Like, it's pretty like straightforward. Next to him is also wearing similar PPE. So here is the next picture. So we're not gonna comment on the mask wearing. That is not gonna be applicable in this situation. But this is an interesting picture. So it looks like a lab. That clipboard in the back, this is just something for me. So typically we don't use like wooden kind of clipboards. You want like a metal clipboard, because if that breaks, which it could, or flake off, that's not super safe. I would not take that out onto the production floor. So it looks like he's in a lab, so I don't think the hairnet should be needed, but maybe he just came out from there or something. And also he has an open container of some substance with a spatula indicating he is working in a lab. He does not have goggles on. That is a negative for this picture. And he's, yeah, no lab coat on, so he's risking his Gucci tracksuit. And then here's the last one we are gonna show of him. This one does appear to be out on like a manufacturing floor, and you'll see the people have their uniform shirts on. He has a lab coat, they have hairnets, they have goggles, all the way buttoned up. And from what I can tell, it does not appear that he is wearing any jewelry. This is what should be happening in a manufacturing situation. But the reason why I wanted to point out this picture is because you see he's not wearing gloves, but he is writing things down. So the whole point in manufacturing is you need to write everything down or it didn't happen. That's your evidence for things. And when you are writing, you're supposed to take off your gloves. You're supposed to switch gloves pretty much every time that you swap a task. That's to reduce cross-contamination. So other than that cardboard clipboard, I think it's cardboard. Yeah, you can see it's cardboard. But metal would be better. That would be my one improvement. But that's not PPE related. That's just me telling you. That today, when we went through these pictures, that this gave you some kind of insight into proper PPE. We see often a lot of times posting videos about people wearing improper PPE, but the people that are making those assessments don't have a background in that. So that's why I wanted to share my opinion based on my own experiences. I do have enough to do a part 2, so I will be doing that. If you have any pictures or videos of celebrities or influencers in these kind of lab situations, please send them to me. And on Twitter, Instagram, my handles will be down below, and I can definitely use those for more future videos if you guys do like these. If you are a regular viewer of mine, you may have noticed this is nothing like any of my backgrounds have been. That is because I have been traveling for work, and I am still traveling for work. But I really wanted to get back into making videos, and I wanted to take any free moment I had to do that. So thank you for coming back and watching. And make sure you leave a comment down below telling me what you learned in this video. And with that, I'll see you in my next video. Bye!